Jean-Claude Van Damme doesn't usually fight with high-tech hardware, but in Universal Soldier, he's a human robot killing machine. Don't worry, he still gets his kicks.
Anyone else remember Rawhide? It was a show back in the 60s about a bunch of cattle drivers starring Eric Fleming and a young Clint Eastwood and the adventures they had while working. Anyhow, there was an episode late in the series where Charles Bronson shows up being a scary badass and trying to bully this kid into engaging in a one-sided duel against him. After feigning offense at getting his clothes splashed with muddy water, Bronson tosses a gun toward the kid and tries to get him to pick the gun up.
No, pick it up. You might as well. One way or another, I'm gonna kill you. Pick it up.
Charles Bronson begins firing his gun threateningly, twingingly. All the commotion brings a crowd, which includes Clint Eastwood, and we get this moment.
Putting a high price on a pair of pants, aren't you?
Maybe you'd like to pay for them.
Anytime, mister.
And that's it. These two guys, respectively legends in the Western and young action genre, never actually square off, despite both providing iconic roles from the same directors and creating classic films in the same genres. And that's got me thinking, it is so very rare to see the big guys in a genre have a versus film, especially when they're in their prime. We never got Schwarzenegger fighting Stallone until they were well out of their best years.
You hit like a vegetarian.
Jackie Chan and Jet Li, same story. A tragic accident prevented us from getting Bruce Lee versus Sonny Chiba, but once upon a time, we did get Universal Soldier. Not to be confused with the 1971 George Lazenby film of the same name, the 1992 Universal Soldier is a surprisingly entertaining and efficient action blast of a film from director Roland Emmerich. Yes, the Independence Day destructor of national monuments guy. Emmerich had worked on the weird and even had a bit of success with science fiction, making him the right guy to take over production when the original director, Andrew Davis, dropped out. Now, I like Davis, but his gritty City Central films are nothing like what a sci-fi actioner of this type needs. Emmerich brings with him a modern sheen and a level of joy to the action set pieces that help keep the movie rolling, almost like an adventure film. Are
we having fun yet?
It was apparently his sci-fi actioner Moon 44 that got him the job, and if you watch it, you'd see why.
Yeah, come on.
Emmerich, a German native, is something of a copycat. You can see him aping Spielberg in Making Contact. Moon 44 is equal parts Star Wars, Blade Runner, and Aliens. But mainly you can see every dollar on the screen. It looks every bit like the big sci-fi blockbuster movie it wants to be. If Universal Soldier was going to enter a market still reeling from the success of Terminator 2, it would be someone who could pull off a slick-looking action film.
Roland came on board. Dean was the writing partner of Roland, and he had a different take. They rewrote the script, and now the script became better now.
I came just from Germany. I was like kind of 9 months in the country. Now I had like some inkling about what it is. I roughly also knew the concept, but I had to really ask, who are the actors in it? And he said to me, like, kind of, oh, it's with Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I said, I know Dolph Lundgren, but who is Jean-Claude Van Damme? It's how naive I was,
Ostensibly, Universal Soldier is an action vehicle for Jean-Claude Van Damme.
At that time, he was like really the new guy on the block. The biggest guy was still Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone.
The muscles from Brussels had already been enjoying a steady stream of low-budget hits with the likes of Bloodsport, Cyborg, Death Warrant, Kickboxer, and Lionheart. This film was meant to break Van Damme into the mainstream consciousness to a more certain degree. So all of the usual turns are there. Stoic hero, love interest, sex appeal, and naive charm. And I'm happy to say it all works. Jean-Claude sells the hero look with aplomb. As far as Dolph Lundgren's career was concerned, one needs only look at the curious fact that he had made Masters of the Universe for Canon Films in '86, and that Cheapo's sequel being developed ended up as Cyborg, starring Van Damme. Despite Lundgren himself starring in several great titles by this point, he was not a heavy hitter name. But don't let any of that fool you. Dolph Lundgren is absolutely 100% the best thing about Universal Soldier. Most of the world really only knew Lundgren from his monosyllabic performance in Rocky IV.
I must break you.
And if they'd seen his other films, they would see little variation in the types of characters and performances offered by the Big Swede. But here, as a reawakening super soldier with post-traumatic stress and sadistic glee, Dolph steals the movie.
Well, I'm fighting this thing, man. I kick ass. Oh, kiss ass.
Chewing scenery and offering a hugely entertaining and darkly humorous villain to play against the light and composed Van Damme.
Excuse me? You should check on your driver, pal. He don't look too hot.
He's emotional, but he's kind of having fun doing this stuff instead of being just evil. Because then there would just be one note. It wouldn't be so much fun to play, and it wouldn't be so much fun for the audience. Images of, for instance, Jack Palance and Shane, you know, when he's like taking his gloves off.
What the name you after? What do you know?
I'm saying that Stonewall Jackson was trash himself.
That kind of thing where you take your time, because if you're doing something evil, then people are watching you, and you can really suck them in that way.
He was very professional and approached this in a very serious way, considering it was an action karate movie.
I guess I was a victim of the over preparation at the time, but I mean, I think the result was pretty good at times.
Oh, God. Do you want to play catch?
The story concerns two soldiers in Vietnam, one who simply wants to make it home and the other who's lost his sanity and wants to kill everything that moves. The two end up killing each other, their bodies becoming host to a government experiment to create super soldiers from the corpses of fallen military men. Despite having their memories chemically wiped, the two begin having flashbacks and start returning to their primary motivations from just before they died. A reporter, played by Ali Sheedy, stumbles upon the truth of these super soldiers, and so Van Damme decides to protect her as both flee from a berserk Dolph Lundgren across a chase film with fights and explosions. Upon its release in 1992, and even in the time since, it was sort of dismissed as a Terminator clone or a ripoff of RoboCop. But I think it's probably more apt to compare it with Sergio Martino's Italian actioner Hands of Steel from 1986. It's slightly similar in terms of plot, with the protagonist played by Daniel Green, a lethal cross between a smoldering Mel Gibson and an over-top-era Sylvester Stallone, is a reanimated man turned cyborg turned assassin. After he flees the scene of an assassination, his makers attempt to hunt him down to destroy him.
Oh, get the trailer!
The movie is set in the Southwest, similar to most of Universal Soldier. We get vehicles going over cliffs, fights with other bionic super soldiers in a motel, and a very similar looking bar brawl.
Son of a bitch!
Hands of Steel borrows most liberally from the Terminator, so I guess it's just tit for tat here.
Oh, you're dead!
As entertaining as I find Hands of Steel, however, Universal Soldier is the vastly superior film, and it is pretty much down to the on-screen rivalry of its screen stars. During the Cannes Film Festival in 1992, this aspect was played up right there on the red carpet.
Accrochage désagréable. Est-il un vrai player? Non. S'il a perdu son sang-froid? Oui. S'il a calculé son coup pour faire parler de lui.
But it's even more golden on the big screen. Again, it's largely because Dolph Lundgren really goes for it. It's worth looking back to see neither of these big players were really strangers to the versus genre, but only in retrospect. Rocky IV made Lundgren a name, whilst before he was even in Bloodsport, Van Damme had duked it out with Kurt McKinney in No Retreat, No Surrender, and ninja movie legend Sho Kosugi in Black Eagle. Still, outside of B-movie genre fans, few knew then or now of those films, and Lundgren had been a speechless extra in A View to Kill before Rocky IV.
Enough of this! Control yourselves!
So again, this movie presents us with that rarity, an honest-to-goodness versus film. I should say that while Lundgren is great, Jean-Claude is not slumming it here. One thing Van Damme never got credit for until rather recently was his acting, but he's always been very adept at portraying pain and anguish, either blatantly or with subtlety. He gets to do both here, which bounces off perfectly with Lundgren's manic insanity.
You're traded too, aren't you? Farm boy.
He physically had done some amazing things, so we knew that we could put him in any kind of physical situation and be fine. The question is, we didn't really know what the acting chops were. And I gotta tell you, that it was, I think, the biggest surprise during the shoot, is that emotionally as an actor, he was very available.
I have to give it to him. He has a certain quality, you know. There's like some innocence about him.
What the hell did they do to you?
I don't know.
It was like very good for the part, because we needed somebody who, in a way, is reborn, and in a way has to learn everything again. I think Jean-Claude has a much more feeling who he is and doesn't take himself too serious.
Of course, all this would be fluff without answering the big question. Is the face-off any good? Hell, yes it is. The entire ending is a battle of epic proportions amidst fire and rain, Lundgren's powerhouse against Van Damme's agility.
Well, that's the spirit, soldier!
Excellent sound design and smooth cinematography combined with sharp editing to emphasize each progressive impact. Look at the slow motion on this shot. And then Lundgren's mugging Wile E. Coyote expression here. But it's best used during those hits. Van Damme's signature spin kick colliding with a whip as if time slows down for him to warm up that swinging boot. Feet, fists, and plenty of blood.
Claude is a big guy, and I'm also a big guy, you know? So when a big guy touch a big guy and the other big guy get nervous, the big guy hands go crazy. But I mean, it was good kick. I want Dolph to hit me good. I asked him. So all this we choreograph, we talk together, and when we start to touch each other, we start to feel each other, it's like everything go fluid.
Universal Soldier is a fairly violent film, though surprisingly tame for the genre. There are a few dozen deaths shown in the movie, but it doesn't have nearly the body count one would expect. Instead, disaster master Roland Emmerich films as much destruction as he can. Glass shatters, wood splinters, cars go through buildings, and vehicles explode. Much of this mayhem can be credited to second unit director and world-famous stuntman Vic Armstrong.
Vic Armstrong, second unit director and stunt coordinator, designed some extraordinary action sequences, taking full advantage of the Universal Soldier's incredible strength and abilities.
I think a good action picture always has to have a reason for the action happening. I hate going to cinema myself and just seeing action for the sake of it.
Armstrong worked closely with the writers and actors to design stunts that worked for the characters and also looked great on screen within the budget allowed.
He pretty much took care of it. I always kind of told him what I wanted roughly, and then he worked it out with these guys.
Roland was very good. He'd let Vic do a lot of his stuff himself. He wouldn't interfere too much, which is great, because Vic really knows how to make those things good.
We had very limited budget. So what we did a lot of like stunts which are not very expensive but very spectacular. The first one was when they rappel down the Hoover Dam.
The stunts we do involve scaling down the wall of the dam, which is about 700 and some feet.
You know, rappelling has been done a lot, but we did this Australian style, as we call it, which is facing forwards. Action! And it looks as though guys are just running down there, which, you know, gives it a different look. And some of the wide shots, you suddenly get the perspective and the scale of the whole thing when you see the dam so vast and two little fly specks coming down, and then you zoom in or cut in closer as you, whatever you want. That'll be very spectacular.
It would be easy to label Universal Soldier a big dumb action movie because, well, it is. But looking a tad deeper into what's going on in the frame shows a hint of a script legitimately concerned with government corruption and the treatment of soldiers, in particular, the soldiers of Vietnam.
No apologies, no regrets.
There was no question about that because, as you know, when I resigned, later President Ford issued a pardon. When I accepted the pardon...
Hell, there are two characters named Woodward and Bernstein. When looking back on the films written by the writers, I found a movie called Human Experiments, which dealt with erasing one's identity and replacing it with another. It's even attempted in the film to create a killer from scratch. In Universal Soldier, our main characters have their identities and memories continually wiped using a chemical process, but trauma rewires the brain, and these memories come back nonetheless.
That's an order!
A more competent filmmaker than Roland Emmerich likely could have made a truly interesting narrative based on the concepts lurking in the script, but I suppose I'll settle for this, because at the end of the day, we're watching Universal Soldier to see these two titans kick each other's ass. Originally, the movie had a different ending wherein Van Damme is gunned down, survives, but rapidly ages, and then dies. The final fight was much shorter also.
We actually went back for 2 weeks and reshot stuff and added moves to the fight because it was a little too short, people felt, you know, in the first version.
Well, I think they chose wisely in giving us more fight and less pathos for the climax. It made for a messy bunch of sequels, but let's save that topic for a later date. A few pieces of trivia. Contrary to what the Kain Film Festival clip would have you believe, the two stars got along really well.
Hey Dolph, look at there. He's always late. Always come late on the set. You know, I mean, this is not good. Really? He has to learn. Who's this?
Yeah, I liked him. Nice guy. Martial artist. Very youthful, very spontaneous.
Can somebody show me how to swim?
Lots of energy, lots of ideas about his career. A very smart guy with himself and his career.
Both appeared in the video for Ice-T's Body Count, which played over the end credits of the film. Van Damme was always far more lively and fun than his on-screen image would have you believe.
Hold on. Ready?
Oh, sole mio, amore mio.
One thing I rarely see mentioned is his penchant for voices.
You don't know Steven Seagal. No. I would love to know him, you know.
And in particular, impressions. In addition to a fun and exaggerated take on Stallone, Van Damme does a dead-on Dolph Lundgren impression.
Roland, for the fight scene there, yeah, I understand. Hold on, Jean-Claude. But if I supposed to, if I supposed to kick him, yeah, what's the reason for using a gun? Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. That's Dolph.
And finally, Universal Soldier also featured German bodybuilder Rolf Muller as a unsung. Muller had previously appeared with Van Damme in Cyborg. He was also good friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who showed up on the set to Universal Soldier and hung out with both Muller and Van Damme. Jean-Claude even has an amusing story to tell about Arnold's visit.
And I told him, look, Arnold, because I want to push my friends.
Ok, ele falou, olha o Arnold ali que ele queria brincar com os amigos, né?
This guy one day will be a good director.
Ele falou que o Schwarzenegger um dia ia ser bom diretor.
And Arnold did this to me. Here's Van Damme. Arnold.
Why not every day?
And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.